Mutes are a really useful expressive resource available to many musical instruments. Like the others, trombone mutes can be used to influence the tone and colour of the sound. Used well, mutes can really add to what the trombone can do. The most basic form of muting is to use the hand to cover the bell. This idea has been extended and there's now a whole load of mutes available to extend on this idea. Mutes can roughly be divided into 3 categories. First category, these. The mute goes in the instrument and sticks in there with these 3 corks, allowing the air to pass around the cork. This is a cup mute, this is a straight mute. Number 2, those with a seal around the top, forcing the air through the mute and through the mute only. Here I have the Harmon or the wah-wah mute, the solo tone mute, and an example of a practice mute. Your third option are the bucket or hat-shaped mutes. So these typically clip on or sometimes go into the instrument, sometimes held against it, but they all have a similar kind of muffling effect. There's not a huge change in dynamic, but it's a really beautiful sound. All of these mutes are available in a variety of shape and material, meaning each of them are very unique. I'll make sure to follow this video up with a look at each individual mute so you have a really good idea of what to expect from the sound and the types that might be on offer. Another way to consider mutes is in just 2 groups: the passive mutes that just go in and change the sound, and a more active mute. An example of an active mute is the Harmon. So you do put it in the instrument, but the player can use their hand to actively change the sound as you go. This is a great effect, but it does limit the player to what they can do on the rest of the instrument. If my hand is busy there, I won't have access to my valve. There are a few practical things to consider when writing for mutes. Intonation can vary widely, and on some mutes there are notes that don't speak at all. It's really up to the player to adjust the tuning, and it's worth just having a dialogue with them to discuss the sort of strengths of each mute so you can make the most of it. Orchestral players are more than likely to own at least one straight mute, often with a different bottom for a different colour, more than likely a cup mute, and I'd expect they'd have a big collection too, but know that some mutes are more specialist than others. Again, this shouldn't be too much of an issue, just make sure the player knows what's expected of them. We are used to asking around for bucket mutes in particular. Something else to note is that sections, especially ones that work together regularly, will tend to have matching mutes, and that's so they have the best chance of sounding like a really good ensemble. Another big consideration when writing is to think about the time that's needed to change or add or remove mutes. Trumpet players can do this much quicker than us, and tuba players much slower. If you are writing for us, please keep this in mind. We do have some tricks up our sleeves. We can tuck stuff under our legs, but by asking us to do it too quickly, you risk it being quite a noisy process, and nobody really wants that. In musical notation, the indications mute, dampfer, gedampt, sordine or consordino call for the use of a mute. By convention, when we see those terms in an orchestral setting, we'd expect to use a metal straight mute, but times are changing. Just make sure you're really clear about what you're hoping for. The active mutes, like the Harmon we looked at, that require more instruction than putting it in the instrument and out, will take some specialist notation. An example of this is using an O for open on the Harmon and a cross for shut. Again, dialogue with your players is key here. Everyone just wants a clear idea of what's expected. Like with our playing, there aren't really limitations to what we can do with this equipment. I have no doubt that more will appear soon. I have heard rumours of a kazoo mute, and I have no doubt there'll be a lot to play with electronic mutes soon too. As with everything, especially if you're writing for someone in particular, just talk to them. We're going to know so much about the annoying fiddly things as well as what sounds really good on this equipment, and I have no doubt any trombone player will be happy to share those things. Thank you for listening. I hope this has been a helpful introduction to mutes. do keep your eyes peeled for a follow-up. I promise I will demonstrate how these sound, which is probably the most important thing.